Good day everyone, I am Jordan Tungal, and for today's video, we're going to discuss what is the reason and impartiality as a requirement for ethics. Have you ever faced a tough decision where emotion clash with logic? Or seen someone who chooses favoritism over fairness? In moments like this, we realize that ethics isn't just about what feels right. It requires reason and impartiality. But why these principles are so essential in making moral choices? Let's explore our objectives. Number 1, to understand impartiality, reason, and its importance. Number 2, to have enough knowledge on how to make ethical decision making. And last is to improve decision making skills. But first, understand what is reason. Or in Tagalog, it is razón. The word reason comes from the Latin word ratio, which means reckoning, calculation, or explanation. It was later adapted into Old French as raison, meaning argument or justification, before entering Middle English as reason, carrying meaning related to logic, thinking, and justification. In short, reason means justifying or explaining an action or an event. Since we know what is the definition of reason, let me ask you a question. Is reason a requirement for morality? The answer is yes, because reason allows individuals to critically evaluate action, weigh consequences, and determine what is just or unjust. So what happen if we don't have reason or rason? Without reason, our moral decision would be based solely on instincts, emotion, and societal conditioning. Since we know what is the definition of the reason and why it is requirements for an ethics, now let's move for the next topic, which is the impartiality. So let's first understand what is the definition or the meaning of impartiality. The word impartiality comes from the Latin word impartialis, which means not partial or not biased. It refers to the quality of being fair, neutral, and not favoring one side over another. Impartiality is essential in ethics, justice, and decision making, as they ensure that judgment are based on facts and principles rather than personal preferences or prejudice.
Now that we've established the foundation of morality, let's focus on impartiality. So impartiality is essential in ethical decision making because it ensures fairness, justice, and the prevention of discrimination. Without it, our moral choices risk being influenced by personal biases or favoritism, leading to unfair outcomes. But what if we don't include impartiality into our decision? So without it, morality becomes inconsistent, subjective, and biased. So this inconsistency weakens the credibility of ethical decisions, making them unreliable and unfair. So when morality is shaped by personal preferences rather than principles, it loses its purpose. So how do we ensure that our decisions are ethical? So one way is by following a structured approach that helps us analyze ethical dilemmas fairly and systematically. This brings us to the 7-step model for ethical decision making. So this model provides a clear framework to guide us through ethical dilemmas. Number 1 is to gather facts. 2, identify the stakeholders. 3, articulate the dilemma. 4, list the alternatives. 5, compare the alternatives with ethical principles. 6, weigh the consequences. 7, make a decision. So let's break down these steps. So the first step is to gather the facts. So it's crucial not to jump to conclusion but to ask key questions like who is involved, what is happening, when and where did it occur, and why is this important. In some cases, facts may be unclear or unavailable due to uncertainty in ethical issues. However, gathering as much information as possible and clarifying assumptions will create a clear understanding of the situation. So once we have the facts, we need to identify the stakeholders, those who are directly or indirectly affected by the decision. So stakeholders are classified into 2 groups. First is primary stakeholders, those directly impacted. Next is secondary stakeholders, those are the indirectly affected people. So understanding their perspective helps ensure that decisions are made fairly and ethically, considering the well-being of all involved.
Forward. So now that we have identified the stakeholders, the third step is to articulate the dilemma clearly. This means expressing the ethical dilemma in a way that highlights the competing values involved. Like, for example, we might face a situation where maintaining confidentiality conflicts with the need to save others. In this case, the competing values are privacy and safety. By clearly stating the ethical conflict, we can improve our awareness and comprehension of the situation. This deeper understanding is essential because it helps us to grasp the full story behind the moral conflict and the potential impact on those involved. The more aware we are of this different aspect of the dilemma, the better equipped we are to make a balanced and informed decision, especially when lives could be affected. So, after articulating the dilemma, the fourth step is we need to list the alternative. This step involves thinking creatively about potential action. Instead of just making solutions A and B, we should try to come up with a third option, the solution C, that might satisfy the interests of all primary parties involved. Exploring multiple alternatives ensures that we are not backed into a corner and we might consider a wider range of possible options. So, with the list of alternatives ready, the fifth step is to compare the alternatives with the principles. In this case, our core principles and values, or what values we want to uphold. For example, one of our values is honesty. We need to ask ourselves which of the options uphold honesty and which does not. This process helps us eliminate actions that are illegal or unethical. By systematically evaluating each option against our values, we reduce the risk of overlooking important ethical consideration. The fifth step is to compare the alternatives with the principles. In this case, our core principles and values, or what values we want to uphold. For example, one of our values is honesty. We need to ask ourselves which of the options uphold honesty and which does not. This process helps us eliminate actions that are illegal or unethical. By systematically evaluating each option against our values, we reduce the risk of overlooking important ethical consideration. Now, let's move to the sixth step, which is to weigh the consequences. This step is about carefully considering the effects of each possible action on all stakeholders. To do this, we need to filter our choices to determine if any of them would violate ethical values. It's important to look at both the positive and negative consequences of each alternative. For example, if saying certain information could save a life but would also breach confidentiality, we need to think which consequences is more severe and which value should take importance. This step ensures that our actions align with ethical values and take into account the well-being of all parties affected. So finally, the seventh step, or the last step, is to make a decision. Deliberation is important, but it cannot go on forever. At some point, we must commit to a course of action. It's also essential to avoid what known as paralysis by analysis, where we overanalyze or overthink a situation to the point of us not able to take actions. There are no easy or painless choice in a moral dilemma. Our decisions should reflect the values we want to uphold. This systematic approach helps us make informed and justifiable decisions. So, conclusion. In conclusion, reason and impartiality are very important in ethical decision making. Throughout our discussions, we have seen how reason allows us to evaluate actions critically, weigh consequences, thoughtfully and ensure that our judgment are based on facts rather than emotion or societal pressures. Similarly, impartiality is essential to uphold fairness in our decision, and it prevents bias and ensures that all stakeholders are considered equally, making sure that ethical judgments are not influenced by personal interest or favoritism. Another thing we discussed is the 7-step model, which offers a systematic approach to ethical decision making, starting from gathering facts to making a decision, helping us navigate complex moral dilemmas with clarity and consistency. Ultimately, ethical decision making requires not only a clear understanding of facts and principles, but also the courage to act upon them. As we move forward, let's ensure reason and impartiality are part of our decision making to ensure that our actions are both moral and just. So that's all. Thank you for listening.